Good morning. Buenos dias. Don't worry, I still have my house, my home, my apartment, but we're in a different place today. Do you want to tell everybody where we are today?
We are in a very special place called Casita del Pueblo in Uptown Whittier. If you can tell, it's beautiful. I'm excited.
I'm excited. This is the most beautiful set I've ever had. This is a treat. This is a treasure. We met the owner of this place a few years ago, Yolanda, and she has graciously let us film this really important coffee chat with Atalie today. Who are you, Atalie? Oh my God.
Oh my God, who am I?
The bitter woman? Maybe you've seen her online?
Maybe, right? So yes, my name's Atalie. I'm the founder of The Bitter Woman.
The Bitter Woman. Tell me, what's The Bitter Woman?
So The Bitter Woman is a platform, a community that I started actually through my own, I would say, self-growth journey. But it's a space, for BIPOC women who are looking for community, for support, with unapologetic personal growth. And the story's still being unfolded, so much to come with that.
That's exciting.
Yeah. I'm very excited.
Ooh, I'm excited. When we were talking about what we would potentially talk about today, I think it only made sense to talk about the bitter woman. I don't know why, but in Spanish, when you're like amargada, it just sounds so like vicious. Well, it sounds like I just remember growing up and like mis tías saying like está amargada. Like there's just now I'm like, this is what's great is like I'm having a moment to think about this. I'm like, it makes me think like growing up when I would hear that, it'd be like there's such a judgment passed on to people, and it's like, and that's all you hear. You go, yeah, well then she's just bitter, but there's no sense of like understanding like what's going on with them and all that stuff. But I guess like maybe we can start with what does it mean to be bitter? I think that's a great place to start. That's why I bring that up, because I feel like growing up, I feel like my interpretation of being bitter was just like, you said, what did you say right now? You said it was powerful?
It's powerful.
Well, yeah, what do you elaborate, Atalie?
Yeah. Well, I think bitter is going to mean something different to every person, right? Like, I think that bitterness, like, if we think about it in the dictionary term, it can be resentful, it can mean angry, it can just mean like you got a negative outlook on all things in life. But I also think it's very powerful. So I know with the name, like the bitter woman, we're like, what is she just like?
What's that about?
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, she's just like this resentful, like amargada person. But I see it as like being bitter. We all have a reason to be bitter. So we'll snap our fingers with that.
We will.
We're going to snap our fingers with that one because, life's hard.
We'll snap our fingers on that one too.
But I think that being bitter and understanding like the places in which like we are bitter, it could be with our family, it could be with our friends, it could be with our career, it could be with life. It's an opportunity for us to kind of see like where our wounds are, and that's how I interpret it. Is bitterness is like a place that we need to like look in and dig deeper to see like, well, where's that negative energy coming from?
I love that. Wow, you just like turned that on its head. But you're changing. You are like, I think even just seeing it that way, and even right now when you're like, it's powerful. I wasn't expecting you to say that. That's why I was like, we're gonna come back to that. Because I feel like when you're growing up, when you would hear people say that, right, it's generations of people holding on to that space or that bitterness. And so for you, can you tell us a little bit about how did you, like, how is that process for you? Like, you recognize your bitterness and then you're like, okay, then I'm going to reflect on my wounds. Like, how did that look like for you, and what inspired the beginning of that journey for you?
Yeah, I like that question. It's a very deep question,
Whoa, you're on here with like Yaki. I know. This morning I was playing something and I was like, dude, that's some deep stuff you're listening to. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm like, I can't go light. But yeah, let me know if it's okay if it was too deep.
Good. I think it's good because I think it's good to talk about it because I'm not in that place that I was before. And I think sometimes too, like when you are like let's say we'll talk about being bitter, right? When you are bitter, sometimes you don't even recognize that you're being bitter. It's your friends or it's your family or even just like they notice it, right? They call you out or they don't want to be around you anymore.
Let's sit on that. Yeah, you can push people away. I mean, ultimately, unfortunately, if you do that. Yeah.
And for me, it really started in 2020 when the pandemic hit.
We remember that year, right, everyone?
Right?
Ooh, I know.
That pandemic was crazy. But it was really hard at first because I think that for a long time, I kind of felt like I had to control everything. Like I needed to know, like, okay, this is what my next move is. This is what I'm doing. Yeah. You know, I just graduated from college like 2 years before the pandemic, and I was working, but I was like, okay, like, yeah, I graduated.
Is this it?
Yeah,
You're like, is this it?
Or like, what? Like, what's my purpose? Like, what am I supposed to do? So then the pandemic hits, and we're forced to stay inside, right? So I was forced to really just like sit with myself and to really just like take a look at my life. And I realized I was bitter as fuck.
Oh, it's okay. We can cuss here.
Yeah, we can cuss.
YouTube says you can't cuss like within the first like 5-10 seconds. So I think we're good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think
so. You were bitter as fuck, is what you said.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I was bitter as fuck.
Wait. I'm sorry. I do jump into these questions or these answers because there's some moments that I do want to dissect. And you said that you noticed that you were bitter. Looking back now at the fact that you recognized like, oh shit. Like, who was that Atalie? Who was that? The person that recognized it. Because I'm not talking about the bitter person. I'm talking about the person who recognized it.
That's
which I think is different. Yeah, I mean, those are
recognized it. You know what? I'm gonna take it here. You know where I think it is? I think it was little Atalie.
Oof. Yeah. She came out.
Yeah. I think it was little Atalie that recognized it because I think a lot of, like, at least for me personally, a lot of my trauma came from my childhood. And I was still living in my childhood home when the pandemic hit.
Yeah,
so
that's... Ooh.
Yeah. So I think it was little Atalie that came out and was like, yeah, damn. Oh, we're going there.
Sorry. No, I'll say this much. Thank you for sharing that. I think that inner child that we all have, like, man, like, sometimes I feel like they're stronger than I sometimes feel like they're stronger than I am. And it's a really weird thing to say. I don't know if that even makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, they are.
And they are, and I'm like, damn, like, but it's the fact that you were able to like connect with her. Like, I don't think that is that is a coincidence. You know what I mean? Like, I think something. I don't know what you believe in, but like, I don't know.
I do. I believe in a higher power for sure. I believe in God, but I think it was like trying to I think she was coming back. You know, and trying to like connect and
like, I'm here.
Yeah. And it's also to remembering who that was because at some point, right, we weren't always like this like traumatic, damaged child.
We were.
There's situations that caused that. And I think that I was trying to kind of remember that. I was like, who was I before all of this trauma? Like, who was I? And then I have pictures, and if you look at those pictures, you're like, yeah, like you're happy, like you loved life, you know? But back to your question, you know, I think that was who came back. She was just looking to come and to heal. And then that really kind of transpired into La Mujer Amarga, but in a more positive way.
Yeah, I think that's really, how did you find the positivity in that? Like, what, yeah. Because to me, I'm like, it's pretty, I mean, I really like it when, I really admire people who like have a new way of understanding things, because you're bringing a new way of like thinking. Like it's not just a community, you're actually also changing the narrative of like how we process things, how we see things. And I think, like you said earlier, like offline, breaking cycles, you know, breaking generational trauma and all that stuff. Like, what do you think it is about you, or maybe your inner child, that is bringing forth that positivity or that sort of new way of thinking?
What is it? You know, I think one of the things that I learned during the pandemic, and it was with just like, it really kind of started with me just like journaling. So I literally would just like pour my soul into my journal. And I'm talking about like all the good and all the bad. Like, okay, like this is like my story. Like I was just going deep and talking about it and like just pouring it out there. And then understanding that in a lot of ways, and I know this might be hard, like not everyone can see this, but I think that's where the shift happens, is that we actually do have control over how we feel about things. And sometimes we can't really control somebody else, and we can't control our environment, but the one thing that we do have power over is us, like in how we feel. And of course, that was not easy for me to accept. I was like, wait, what do you mean? And this was just me like really
it's
like...
the bitterness, that's like, the resistance of that, of like, what do you mean? I feel like that's where bitterness comes seeping through, and it stops you. I don't know, that's the first thing I thought of right now, when those thoughts get in your head and you're like...
It's the resistance. And then it's like also too, you want to point the finger at everybody else, or you want to point the finger at your situation to be like, yeah, that's why I'm the way that I am. But in reality, we do have challenges, and life is always going to throw you some curveballs. Like that's a promise. And that's what the pandemic showed you, is like everything can change overnight. In a blink of an eye, like your life can change. And being able to kind of see that challenge as an opportunity is where growth happens. And that's kind of what I had to do, is I of course, like there's tools, like I did a lot of therapy, which thankfully, like,
great.
Therapy's amazing. But really just kind of like understanding, what does that mean to take control over your life and take control over your emotions? So you control your emotions versus your emotions controlling you.
I mean, it is very ironic, because even just hearing you say the word control, I feel like a lot of what people out there that, you know, talk about spirituality or mental health, this idea of like, I've recently been into somebody named Michael Singer, and he talks about how it's a lot of the time this resistance, and maybe in this case bitterness, is not seeing your reality for what it is. So when you're talking, so I want to understand when you're saying about how like there's reality, but then you're saying there is control. There's control of your feelings about the reality, right? And so some of us are not, I feel like we're not focused on that. We're focused on like the reality. It's like it's almost like we're putting ourselves aside from it. And and you're saying, you center yourself. Like you should be a part of the equation.
Well, I have to say, your thoughts create your reality.
That's hard. That's a hard one for me. It's hard, because it's like,
hard.
Have you heard the exercise? And they're like, okay, I'm going to tell you not to think about an elephant. Okay, you can't think about the elephant. And then all you do is think about the elephant, right? So it's like, how do you, Atalie, like work on those thoughts of like shaping your thoughts and shaping the environment within?
That's a good question. How do I shape those thoughts within? You know, I think a lot of it is just, well, one, I practice gratitude every day. Okay, so I've kind of learned to appreciate the good and the bad, right? Because I had to adopt this mentality and this mindset that everything is happening for me, not to me.
That's right. That's what Yolanda was telling me earlier. She's like, yes.
And it's like, how do you do that? What do you mean that everything's happening for me and not to me? And really what it comes down to is you have to understand that like there's lessons to be learned through everything. You know, sometimes you may be experiencing like toxic family dynamics, right? what's the lesson to be learned there? You may get a flat tire on your way to work sometimes, and instead of getting upset about it or getting like, be like stay like, going off like I'm having the worst day, it's like, okay, like what's to be learned here? What can I do? And I think for me, it's just that when I practice gratitude and I realize that like if I'm alive today, that's a blessing in itself, and I need to be here still. Like I still have work that I have to do, and then kind of thinking my thoughts with that. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, which leads me to more questions, me. So a lot of what I try to do also here with these coffee chats is like, there's people out there who are not as far along in understanding or being open to some information, because maybe they are battling with some stuff. For example, I know with me, I'm like, when I can't see gratitude, I was like, I am aware of my patterns. I'm like, oh, if I'm not feeling gratitude, like something's up with me. Like I need to take a look, but it is hard to like, how can you kind of, what advice do you have for people who they're struggling with their mental health and gratitude is not necessarily near reach, because they're kind of in the middle of the bitterness, if you will. Maybe they're right in the middle, the thick of it, and they can't quite get there. I don't know what comes to mind.
Yeah, one, I think too, I don't want to promote like this toxic positivity either, right? Because like, let me not just say that, oh my God, I'm rainbows and butterflies every single day of my life, because that's not true.
Por eso that's why I'm asking this question, because the truth is like sometimes gratitude is freaking fucking hard to attain.
It is hard. But I think one of the things that's important to me is like I really, really prioritize community, right? And I think that there's things that you really can't do alone. And when you are going through some fucking shit and you don't have, a support system, or you don't have people or even books or music that you can go to in those hard times, those are like, that's the thing is like, you don't have to necessarily do it alone. So for me, when you're not able to like focus on gratitude, or you're just like, man, today's super, super hard, mentally, physically, emotionally, I feel like, having a community that you can go to to kind of take you, either listen to you, create space for you, and just even like you just like be in it for a little bit. Like if you are just wanting to be in it, I'm gonna be here and you can be in it. You can be in it, but I'm not gonna let you stay there. And then that's when the community comes in and you're like, okay, like, all right, like I allowed you to feel the feels, right? If you want to go and you want to cuss everybody out and you want to do this and you want to do that, like that's okay. That's okay. You don't have to have gratitude, but I want you to know that like don't try to do it by yourself, because you don't have to. Like you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to, right? That's like the perfect scenario. Not everyone has that, and I understand that. And I recognize that, but I think that's why it's important to kind of find spaces where you could do that, or find tools like therapy. I always say that your therapist usually, if you have the privilege to access therapy.
You said something really cool. I mean, all the things you said were cool. But you said something really cool about, girl, creating space for you. And I feel like that is, I don't know, I think that's really powerful for anyone out there that's feeling a certain way. It's like, that is what sometimes we need to process. Like, because I don't think we're programmed to really process our feelings or understand them. We're so quick to be avoidant or just to move on, or it's not a big deal. And I think that's, because people say community, but what you nailed it. I mean, at the end of the day, what that means is that you're creating space for that person to be individually to feel that they have that space to, if they want to cuss or if they want to, cry and I think, not to go down, I never know where this conversation is going to go. I already told her that. Ya le dije.
This is organic, but go for it.
I'm just like, man, like after doing all these conversations, I'm just like, man, like I have a new fondness for children in a way I never thought I would. Like the more I understand how much like, oh, my inner child could have had different experience. I'm like, oh my gosh, like now when I see kids, I'm like, oh, I hope they're okay. I'm just like, I don't know. It's just like this awareness that like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you think about like child development, and I don't know if you have people in your family who are children, or if like, if you approach them differently now that you've gone through this journey.
I love that you said children, because I think, like, if you look at a child, like, there's so much, like, innocence, like, pure joy that comes with just being a kid, or, like, being able to just be a kid, you know? I have appreciation. We don't necessarily have any, like, young kids in my family right now, but my best friend actually just had a baby.
Aww,
yeah, so
congrats.
congrats to that. And he's just kind of watching him grow up and seeing how she's, like, raising him. She's letting him just, like, go and, like, live and just, like, be in dirt and, you know, just do things that kids do, right? But I think I have appreciation because not all kids can grow up with that freedom. And that comes back to now that, like, you asked me if I kind of did this work, is I don't want to give my kids or the children in my family the responsibility of, like, being a parent or, like, being responsible. Like, I want you to just be.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's powerful to just be. Like, I don't know. I think it's even as adults, like, just be. Like,
right.
We lose sight of that. Yeah, I almost feel like this work that I'm doing, like, I almost am kind of like, oh my God, like, what if I didn't do this work? Like, had I not done this work, like, how would I approach, like, how would I see the world, or even how could I influence, young people around me? I'm like, I haven't thought about that until this moment. I'm like, oh yeah, it's kind of cool to know that it's not just something that's for you individually, but how it affects, like, how you treat other people and see things, like, can really have ripple effect.
It does. And I think that's, like, the one thing, people say, like, hurt people, right? And so when you kind of, like, do this work and you kind of work on your, like, energy that you give to others, that energy can either bring someone up or that can bring someone down.
Yep.
So it's important, and I always say, like, for us to, like, not the easy work. It's not easy work, right? It's not easy to say, like, to do it.
It's not endless work either, by the way. Apparently it's continuous.
Yeah,
so,
it's continuous. And it's constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. And sometimes I think the challenges might get even harder. But it's one of those things, it's like at the end of the day, you don't want to create a world where people, like, suffer because of your own suffering, Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe sometimes I think I'm an idealist because I think in that way.
I mean, that I am with you. I'm with you too.
But it's like, I went through some shit, and I don't want anyone else to have to go through that either. And, like, that's my thing, is, like, that's kind of where you break the cycle, and that's where you have that shift, because you're no longer choosing to, like, bring pain upon others. Yeah. It is a ripple effect. You know, regardless of whether maybe you're not aware of it, but it does have an impact, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot about, like, I'm, very open about my journey being, coming out, being queer, and my family. And I'm just like, it was really hard, but I'm like, I think honestly, one of the motivations was like, man, I don't want anyone at least in my family, that to feel what I felt, the loneliness I felt. So that's, to me, is like, okay, if it was all worth it, like, I've actually had some experiences where even, like, a neighbor of mine who's much younger was, like, asking me for advice, and then I walked away and I'm like, oh my God, did I just give her, like, it's a full circle moment to be like, oh my God, like, I'm not that broken girl anymore, like, I'm strong. Like, even my mom says that now, which is super weird. It's hard to receive that information, but my mom's like, you're pretty resilient, like, to have gone through that. And I'm like, sometimes it's hard to allow yourself to be like, man, like, I accomplished that, or I am strong.
You are.
Thanks, dude.
No, you are. And I would say I might even have to ask you advice, because I'm, like, you hit an interesting topic, because I recently came out not too long ago, and I'm going through all the motions of, like, what does that actually mean to come out, right? And to be in this relationship, and to be, like, honestly, the happiest I've ever been. Yay.
I know the feeling. Yeah. Hell yeah.
And to kind of just be like, and now that's a whole other thing. I feel like that's why, in a lot of ways, like, the bitterness kind of came back to me in a way, because I'm constantly having to kind of push back on these like ideas and this like mentality of like my family.
Girl.
Right?
I mean, one thing I can tell you, and it was honestly thanks to a therapist. I mean, that's the craziest thing, is like I could not have done what I'll tell you right now is like without my therapist.
Yeah.
I was going to propose to my wife, and my sisters, you know, they know. I mean, I'm pretty open about this stuff, so, but they didn't want the kids to know. And so we had been lying to them for 5 years, and we were going to propose, and I was like, dude, like, I don't want to lie to them anymore. Like, I don't want to feel like a monster. Like, this is a happy moment, and I want to include my family in this experience. And it took my therapist, shout out to you. I always send her the videos. I don't know if she watches it, but I was just on the chance. But she walked me through it, and you know what? I didn't realize how much like I had accommodated a lot of making sure they were comfortable. And she's like, are you comfortable with your identity? And it's like, she literally had me say like, I'm a proud gay woman. And I'm like, I never said that. I was like, I'm a proud gay woman? I guess, like, I don't know, it was weird. But she made me understand like, wow, like so much of, and it did create bitterness. So I will tie this back to this, is like, I didn't realize that by what I thought I was doing, which is like trying to make them comfortable, it was creating resentment. Because I'm like, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that, but I knew that it was like, well, that was my only way. And so it was until I let go, which actually somebody else pointed this out when I told them the stories. Like, I actually let go of the control. Like you said, the control of like how they were going to react. I centered myself first, and I said, this is my timeline. If you want to be a part of this, you're welcome. And that was hard. I'm not saying that's easy. Like, that literally took therapist like sessions to like, because it's hard with family to have those boundaries. But I was like, I did that, and like, luckily my sisters were both like, no. Okay, well, I mean, should it come down to that? I don't think so personally, but maybe had I worked on myself and been like more prioritizing, like, you know, accepting myself and all that stuff, maybe it could have been different. But you know, unfortunately, it did take like an outside person to help me through that. Yeah, but I did it, and it all, I mean, it you know, in the end it was fine, but it did cause some bitterness in the process, you know. What? What do you think?
Man, I think you're very brave, because I know how hard that is. And I think, and I don't want to get emotional, but I think it's actually like a sadness that kind of comes over you, and the fact that you have to, when your family is asking you to hide parts of you, you know,
100%.
Or like they just say like, oh yeah, like you can't, like just don't show the kids. And that really does hurt.
It does hurt.
That really,
trust me. I'm sorry.
No, because I've experienced that. I wouldn't say like here. I went back home to El Salvador recently, and that's something that one of my cousins told me, is like, oh yeah, let's just like not show the children. Like, let's not talk about it in front of the kids. And I was like, no, you have to go, like you have to break that. And I think you asked the question of like, how did I overcome the bitterness? And you reminded me that it's letting go of the people pleaser within you, that making other people feel comfortable, right? Versus focusing on like what makes me happy, where's my comfort, and honestly too, like our love deserves to be like demonstrated and shown in just all the other ways that everybody else does, you know, like, and kids should grow up understanding that, you know what, you get to like love who you want to love, and it's more important how they treat you and how they make you feel, whether or not if it's the same sex or whatever. Like that's the kind of that's what we should be teaching our children, is that to be accepting and saying, I want someone who's gonna love you and who's gonna treat you and who's gonna cherish you, versus like
what their gender or sex is. It's kind of, I mean, my heart goes out to you, because it's not easy. It's fucking hard, because it's like, it's hard to not take it personal, right? Because you're like, how do you see me then? Right. If it's something you want to hide, and that's the hard part, right? Because then you're like, oh my God, am I making them uncomfortable? Like, is there something wrong with me? Like, that's how I spiral, how I would spiral. But there comes a moment where you like you have to take ownership of your reality and like who you are. And it's freeing. It's very freeing. It's super liberating.
Yeah.
Because I was like, done. Like, I'm done with the games. Like, done. This is my life. We're over here just crying. But, I mean, it's powerful to be able to do that. To be like, this is my life, you know?
It is your life, and it's an inspiration to others, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not the easy thing to kind of go and like go against your family and go against like, basically it's like these generations and generations of like, you know, mentalities that's been passed down, you know? And then here you are going and saying like, it stops with me. Like this is where it's done,
yes.
you know?
Exactly.
Like, it stops with me.
Yes, it stops right here.
And that's hard, and that's super hard. But that's also it's very inspiring to me, because same thing. Shout out to like therapists that I had to like tell my therapist. I was like, man, like should I be feeling like this? Like it's like this guilt and this shame that they make you feel for who you are. And I'm like, you know what? There's other people in the family that do a hell of like other crazy
make
stuff.
Any sense.
Yeah. But
to hear you say that right now it felt very empowering to hear you say that. Thank you. Yes. I didn't, because I don't have a lot of people in my life that understand that. So that was very cool for you to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Whew. Thank you, because it is difficult, and I'm like, I'm in the middle of it, and the thing is, it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop, because families can be, they can either make or break you, you know? Like they can really make or break you. And
how ironic is that?
You know?
It's so funny.
But I think about it too, it's like when we talk about like our inner child, it's like that inner child, like imagine what would happen if, you know, that little girl had the freedom to just be like, you know what, like Mija, I love you, like,
right?
know, instead of having to hide parts of you or like hide who you love. So I can go on a whole tangent.
Oh yes, we can.
That's like a whole
That's
thing
a whole other thing,
to go into. But yes.
It is an example of how one can get bitter. You know, when we're. Oh, so there was one great question I wanted to ask you was. Oh, you mentioned about like reflecting on your wounds.
Right.
So like, how can one start like identifying them? Like, because I think a lot of people are like can talk, you know, give advice about like, oh, you can forgive yourself and this and that, but like, what does that even really start to look like to be able to like identify your wounds?
I think it starts with self-awareness, and it's so hard. I feel like it's like this thing where like, how do you explain how you can identify your wound, you know? But I mean, I would just say like, look at places in your life where you are hurting the most. You know, like where is that? Like what area is that is that your relationship? Is that with your career? Is that with like, you know, your home situation? And, you know, kind of becoming self-aware, but also I think it's giving yourself permission to like be like wounded in a lot of ways.
Okay. Explain that.
You know, and I think it's okay. Like it's okay to be hurt because like I said again, life is not easy. And a lot of times like there's systems in society that have like put these places in us that don't necessarily allow us to kind of thrive. So acknowledging that, but at the same time, I think what I would say is, what do we say, wounded? I'm trying to think. I was going to go somewhere with this.
You were.
Well, remind me again what you're...
Well, you mentioned, we started from like, how do you identify your wounds? But I think what I'm understanding what you're saying is like, yeah, it's okay to be hurt. I think a lot of the times we're resistant to be like, oh, we're fine, it's fine.
Yeah.
But I think when you accept like your experience, I think accepting your experience and actually reflecting on it and seeing like, you know what, that did freaking hurt me. Like even things that when you were really young, you know, like really... Right? Is that,
you know, I think it's also too is not blaming yourself for everything that's happened to you, right? Because I did talk about like taking accountability, right, for your feelings, but also understanding that like sometimes you didn't really have all the answers at that time, and then that's okay.
Because you know we were kids, you know.
Yeah.
Do we all forget that? Right. Like we were literally children. I mean, take a moment to think about that. Like so much of the anger and like, I mean, for myself is like. I'm barely figuring out, I'm like, wait, I was a kid. Like, what did I, like, literally on the planet for a few years, and like,
Yeah.
what do you expect someone to?
Yeah, and sometimes I think that people expect more from us, depending on how you grew up, right? Like, if we go into like the culture and talking about that, like
nuances.
these, these like roles and expectations that are put upon you, but yeah, you didn't necessarily have to have all the answers. So I think it's just being self-aware of like, okay, this shit hurts, right?
Yes.
And maybe reflecting on how do I want to use, whether it's like this hurt, to stop something, to change. I hope that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, because guess what? By doing that, you're addressing it, you're processing it, and you're moving forward. And so the bitterness, you kind of like feed the bitterness and you house it and you pay rent and you keep it there. You know what I mean? Versus like being able to, which is hard, but I mean, this is proof right here that, there are people who have been able to surpass those bitter experiences or things that built up the bitter to break free. I feel like you're in this. I feel like I'm feeling Atalie like you're breaking through. I don't know.
Breaking through. One thing that I'll share is like I think bitterness can be like a trauma response, right? And sometimes like those things like bitterness can protect you in a lot of ways, and so we stay there because it protects us. That's what we used in order to kind of shield from everything.
Right.
But I've learned just by doing like a lot of work is that we also store trauma in our bodies, right? And being able to recognize like where in our bodies do we store that trauma, and then being able to kind of release has helped a lot. So it's a lot of work, but just being, I think, self-aware.
Yeah. You mentioned the self-awareness. Like, I think that could be when you build a foundation for anything, sometimes it may take a while, but it's part of what you're building is a good foundation to build upon, right? And so I feel like the last few years, I feel like I'm in a very self-aware era. And I thought at the time, oh, that's all. But it's like, there's so much more. But don't to be overwhelmed by this, but it's more of like, that is a foundation of like, Anna always reminds me, I mean, I'm in my mid 30s, but she's like, dude, like you have many years of like, so don't think it's going to happen overnight. Like give yourself like grace and be gentle and like understand that like, it's going to take time. And I think being patient, because I think building that self-awareness is just the first step, but I mean, you cover a lot of ground when you do that. I feel like, I don't know if you agree with that, but I feel like that's the foundation to then really dig deeper and heal in a deeper way.
And then I think that's empowering to be self-aware. Because I think sometimes we're not self-aware because, like you said, we're avoidant or we're just like not going through things. So self-awareness is empowering. And, I think allowing other people to kind of support you also helps. That's something that I had to do before. I was like a super hyper independent person.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I gotta do this all by myself.
I got it,
right? Because it was like me. And then I had to let go of that. I said, no, it's actually not me. Like, I can't do this by myself, So, I don't know, bitterness is a journey. You're gonna have a lot of bitter moments. And I think about my family today. And yeah, maybe they're gonna listen to this, but I still have bitter people in my life, And sometimes I think I've noticed that they kind of want to stay stuck in the past, or they're not open to
100%.
moving forward. And sometimes that kind of, they look at you and that can kind of, intimidate them in a lot of ways because you're the one who chose to, be different. You're the black sheep. You're the one that's like breaking these curses. You're the one that's just doing things differently than everything has been done before.
But the truth, I mean, you're saying all these like terms that like, I think society and these people are saying, but the truth is like you are growing. You're getting stronger. Like you're I feel like that is what people don't understand, that's what's really happening. It's not.
Exactly.
You're not.
Yeah, but then that comes to self-awareness, because maybe they're not self-aware of what is they're projecting on others, right? But yeah, you're growing and you're evolving, and that's kind of how life is. Life is meant to be like an ever-evolving thing. But yeah, I don't know.
It is. I mean,
it is.
I think that's a good way to. That's basically like. It can be scary, for sure, because I think for a lot of us, we're like the first ones to break the cycles, and it can be scary, but then you find community, you find other people who are going. I mean, the more and more I meet more people I'm meeting these wonderful people who are doing that work, and it's just, I think that's also the excitement, is like we're all trailblazing. It's pretty cool.
We are, and I think I would say like shout out to all the first gens that are out there, because that is like it is very, very, very hard.
What's on the other side of bitterness?
There's a lot of beauty on the other side of bitterness. There's growth, right? Like transformative growth, and overall, like things just get better. So I think for me, it's definitely worth going through it. It's not easy to do it, but I think I'm a great kind of example of like, man, my life is completely different, you know, and you start to bring in other people who just kind of uplift you, inspire you, they empower you. And it's a beautiful experience. And I feel like that's really what life is. Like, you're going to go through your ups and your downs, and there's going to be moments, right? Like, you may go back to these like dark places, but on the other side of it, like, there's so much to experience, and there's so much like beauty in that. So
yeah, I think about like the way that when I hear you say these things about being transformative and whatnot, it almost feels like, how do I say this? I feel more myself than I ever have. And it's not easy. I also want to be very cognizant of like, that doesn't necessarily mean like it's all rainbows and, you know, like it's a process. I will say that. For me, it's been a process. Yes, I'm in a different place right now. Like, my life has been changed too, right? Like, the things, because I made a choice, things have changed for me in beautiful ways, personally, professionally. I'm really content where I am. I know that I still have some work to do. There's a lot of forgiveness. It's this part right here, the inner part, that I'm like, now I'm so self-aware that I'm left with like, I need to do the plumbing. You know, there's a lot of plumbing here at work that I need to do. But I know I'm on my way, you know, like I'm not suppressing so much. I'm being more honest with myself. I'm, you know, around amazing people who are doing the same work. And so I know I'm in good company. I know I'm on the right track. But I guess like, yeah, I feel more myself, and I feel more like I'm really, really working hard to know who I am, and because the only like real reflection I've had, right, is when you were a little kid, you know, before everybody gets in your head, you know, it's like that's always my guiding light, and like I said earlier, I feel like the inner child is like a lot stronger than I am right now, but it's somebody I can lean on and I can trust. I don't know if that resonates with you or.
It does. I think it's just saying like you're authentically you, like you who I think it's who you're meant to be.
Oh,
you know, like
okay.
That's really like who it is, and you're understanding that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I feel like the universe does reward you for taking that courageous step and for doing that work. You know, and sometimes you don't necessarily see it because you know you're right here in the moment, but the universe will like pay it forward. You know, it's professionally, it's, you know, personally, it does happen.
I feel like there are moments in my life in the last few years where I'm like, there's just like these little signs where it's like almost like, you know, when you want to give up and then like I don't know, you see candy or something, you just keep going, you're like, okay, vamos. Like, I feel like before this work, I don't know that I was even cognizant of like what was happening, what was around. I was just like, go. And I just like, I feel like it's the universe telling me
Yeah.
like, see
You start to see signs.
yeah,
You'll start to see signs, you know? And it's like, there's so much more to come.
Yeah.
Like this is just the tip of
Yeah.
the iceberg.
Yeah.
Right? The tip. Coffee chats, but then we're going live,
What?
you know? So I don't know. I see something
You see
here.
something?
Yeah.
Okay.
A live show.
I mean-
Okay. All right. You see this right here? We're speaking into
We're speaking
existence.
into
So this was
existence.
just the marker of it.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting you say that because I think like, yeah, I think when you find your authentic self, like you just can't go wrong. Like you will be doing things so truthfully and honestly.
You're unstoppable.
Yeah.
You're unstoppable. You really are.
Oh.
You really are. You're unstoppable. And it's powerful, you know? Like there's so much power there that's yours. So
Beautiful.
yeah. And I feel blessed. Like we're here.
Thank you.
We're both growing. We're still doing the work, you know, not the easy work, but I feel like, you know, I have a supportive community,
Yeah.
you know, to kind of just like go through it together.
Yeah, you do.
Yes.
You do.
And we're in a beautiful space.
And we're in a beautiful space.
Like, look at our background.
So we want to invite the person who let
Yes.
us be here and maybe give her some bread. Maybe she's hungry. So Yolanda, okay. Wait, you know what? Sit down. Sit down with her. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down.
We're sitting.
We're sitting.
Sit down.
Yeah.
Oh, so hold the bread.
Yes.
I'm gonna give you the mic.
Oh,
yeah.
I get mic'd?
Yeah, just just for a second. Just for like a quick second.
I feel so important.
Yes,
You are.
So you've sat through this. She's graciously sat through this conversation.
Oh,
Do you
I
have
love it.
anything to add to wrap it up?
I just feel that everything today that happened, I mean, listening to you ladies was so empowering for me. And I feel that we've had so many great moments in this visit here at Casita. You know, when I started my business almost 20 years ago, I really knew that it was something that I wanted to do for the community. It started with me in my classroom with my students and not feeling like their voices or who they were being represented in this community, and myself being from the community, I shared that. That was like my inner child being reflective at that moment in
That's
teaching.
beautiful.
And it's just like, wow. Like it was just a short-term plan, to be honest. Like I was like, I'm doing something totally out of my element. I don't have a business major. I didn't really have that desire to really, I think, do it, but my inner child was yelling out that this is something that I needed to do, and it was just a beautiful journey that I had. The short-term plan became the long-term plan, and I've been able to meet so many beautiful people, share in their journey, and my journey also has been elevated to another level because I've just had so many people come into it and bring light to it. So I feel very blessed that we all got to meet today here,
Very
and
much
that you
so.
chose Casita. Thank you.
No, thank
And-
you. Thank you. And I have to say, like, before even like having this conversation, I used to come to Uptown Whittier just to come to this store because exactly what you said is that there's not a lot of spaces that kind of like I felt like I could feel my culture, but we're surrounded by it. So I'm so blessed and thankful that we get to share this space together and that you're here, right, for the community. And it's so important. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yay!
Thank you.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
And right, of course.
Look at her beautiful earrings.
Look at my earrings, right? I got these earrings here. They are the Milagro, right, heart
Yes.
earrings, which I love. And Milagro is my grandmother's name, so it's very sentimental that I found these here as well.
Yes.
So it's beautiful.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
everything that we do here is definitely from our corazón. And as you can see, when you come to visit Casita del Pueblo, you'll see many beautiful hearts. You'll see the beautiful space that surrounds us with pieces of different artists' heart. So their hearts are here with us as well, too, because they give so much passion to what they do. And it translates, right? We talked about like this energy that we all carry. And when you connect with people that are moving with you and sometimes against you too, because it's okay. It's okay, you know, and it gives us the opportunity to really reflect. Those moments give us that time to reflect on where we are in our spaces. And it's just been a great journey here at Casita. So I'm glad that you both were here and that this is part of your journey. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ooh, okay, I'm going to have chocolate because I love chocolate.
I know, this is my favorite.
Cheers.
Cheers.